the principal reason why Canada was so inattentive and so tolerant and so complacent about the threat was that it wasn't a threat against us. It wasn't our problem. The Air India bombing, even though the great majority of the victims of that bombing were Canadian citizens, never animated Canadians. Well, they were Indo-Canadians. They weren't really us. And then after that, well, they're not really threatening us. They're threatening India. Well, that's okay. They just let it happen and didn't take it seriously. And then, of course, the Air India bombing, it did bite Canadians. And ever since, we've been in a situation where, because of the astute and disciplined political action by the Khalistani movement in Canada, they've been effectively silenced. They don't want to antagonize people who are going to vote for them en masse. And remember, I think Indians know about the vote bank politics that is an important element in this entire story. The point is that these ridings, these districts, electoral districts, in which there is a predominant Indian population, people from the Indian diaspora, that those districts tend to influence how federal elections turn out in Canada. They're what we call swing ridings. They could go either way, so it's important to get those particular ridings. And where we stand today, of course, is that Canada is still not really confronting those problems, the infiltration into mainstream Canadian politics of Khalistani sympathizers. I mean, we know, obviously, I think Indians know now, certainly, everyone knows that the Trudeau minority government is sustained by the votes of a left-wing party, the NDP, which is led by Jagmeet Singh, who's been a lifelong Khalistani sympathizer. There's no way around it. And as long as that situation continues, you're not going to see the Canadian government going after Khalistani activities and trying to, for example, crack down on these posters, the martyr posters, the killer posters, the diorama illustrating the assassination of Indira Gandhi, and the like. However, having said all of that, and it's pretty bad, I don't deny it in any way at all, this is all the background. It doesn't bear on the point that brings us here today, namely Canada's accusation that India got so fed up with this that it came into Canada and committed murder. Now, we've heard a couple of times already in this broadcast, have we not, that Canada hasn't produced specific evidence. Well, that's the Indian story. But what I'm hearing from Canadian leaks, it's not official, so you can take it for what it's worth. But the Canadians claim that, yes, indeed, for weeks, in Trudeau's phrase many weeks ago, Canada started at the official level approaching the Indians saying, look, we've got some evidence here that one of your guys may have been involved. We'd like you to work with us on solving this case and making sure and finding out whether this is true or not. And that, according to the Canadians, Indian officials did not deny it in private, in those meetings at the official level prior to the meeting between Trudeau and Modi at the G20.
Okay, both the guests want to make a point, Mr. Milewski.
They haven't proved it, but
I request you to hear them out. Prabhlot Singh, despite the Prime Minister of Canada making a great show of it and, going public with the allegations, India has maintained that if you have a specific information, do share the lead with us.
Yes, I mean, it has a reasonable request, isn't it?
Mr. Singh.
So, it has been Canada's stand in the past, and I would like to quote, and Canada has gone on record to say in the past that intelligence is not evidence. So if the Canadian side has shared some kind of intelligence with India, that does not amount to evidence. And that is the stand that Canada has really stood by in the past. And the second thing is, if the Canadian Prime Minister and the Honorable Prime Minister of Canada, and if Canada is really worried about Canadian citizens on Canadian soil dying, then why there was no such statement made or action taken or concern shown when Karima Baloch, a Pakistani activist, Canadian citizen, died on Canadian soil. And the irony is that Karima Baloch was not even a designated terrorist. She was just an activist. but there was nothing done when she was found dead. So it is not about, that if a Canadian citizen dies on Canadian soil, that, it really worries the Prime Minister, because we've seen absolute silence from the Canadian side on in the case of Karima Baloch. But when it came to a designated terrorist, we see so much of hue and cry. And they say they've shared, our fellow Mr. Terry. Terry shared that, he's heard that, Canadian side has shared evidence for weeks. Well, they may have shared intelligence is what we hear about. And it's been the Canadian stand that intelligence is not evidence. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, you're not wrong. I mean, I think that it is a fair point, and I can't argue with you, sir, that what the Canadians have shared, well, number one, it remains shrouded in mystery. I mean, is it evidence? Is it intelligence? We don't really know. And until Trudeau puts his cards on the table and says, okay, I'm going to lay it out now, and here's the evidence, or that's what he calls it, evidence. Until that happens, we can't decide the issue. However, remember that this cuts both ways. I think it's fair to point out that for many years, Canada has been complaining that Indian officials seem to expect that if they say, okay, well, he's a designated terrorist, whether or not there's hard evidence produced, we expect Canada to give him up. But we have a legal process. You want to extradite somebody, you got to produce evidence, not intelligence, evidence that we can put before a court and that will stand up
Captain
before
Alok Bansal, from what we
Canadian
understand,
legal standards. So if we don't have that, what do you expect us to do?
Yes, India has